everybody. Thanks for watching. So Merkabah Scholars Society members, make sure you guys check the app tomorrow for the meeting video. If you missed the meeting, then the link for the video will be up tomorrow. I will also email it out to you guys. I know some of you guys don't be on the app that much. There was an issue with Google and the link, so thanks to everybody who actually made the meeting. I know it was a little mix up, but we did actually have the meeting. I think it was like over 2 hours. So yeah, you guys will get that link on the app tomorrow. All right, so stay tuned for that. Also, make sure you guys take advantage of the Merkabah catalog sale. Also comes with the Shopify Amazon course. That sale is ongoing. You guys asked me for more time on that, so here it is. Make sure you guys take advantage of it while it's still up. It'll be down Monday. But yeah, let's get right into this video. Now, this has been my understanding from, since I really started getting conscious and getting into this information, that the biggest threat to Black unity has always been religion, right? Religion has been the biggest threat, whether you want to accept that or not, because religion is so divisive. It is so complicated. It is so confusing to a lot of people, and it's left up to interpretation for us to interpret any way a person is teaching it or any way that we read it without, true understanding. So if you told the book was real and you believe that, then you're on a roller coaster trying to figure out why is it that these prayers are not being answered? Why is it that I'm not seeing these things in actual history? And if you're going by blind faith, which is what the preachers want you to do, then you're just all the way in and you're lost. So, the biggest threat religious wise, I would say, deeper than Christianity has always been the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, the Black Hebrew Israelite doctrine, because it is more militant, it is more confusing, but it gives more sense to biblical religion than Christianity does, because it makes sense out of Deuteronomy. It makes sense out of our condition if you look at it from a standpoint that we are cursed, right? So this is how you have to look at it, that you have so many Black people who believe in this doctrine, and they are going by the understanding that we are in the position that we are in today because we are cursed. We were cursed by God to be where we are, right? So my whole thing is, when you follow in the history, and you guys don't have a lot of videos on this, why would you want to follow the teachings of a king who basically allow us to be enslaved by our enemies, right? And it doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense with what they want you to believe about that. So yeah, King James was a Black man. He was ruling during the time the King James Version was being circulated. This means a Black king was at the head of the transatlantic slave trade and at the slavery in America. Not just that, but the indoctrination of Black people into worshiping, or looking at the slave master as God, as it says in Ephesians 6:5, right? Why would a Black man put that in there? So clearly it can't be that. It has to be something more to it, because you still have to be logical and think, okay, if King James was a Black man, and we have this slavery going on right around the world, but you have the racism and everything that was taking place in the Americas, and these white people, these super racist people, were basically bowing to a Black king while enslaving all these Black people in the Americas. It don't make sense. It doesn't fit when you understand the history. So we're supposed to believe, if you are a Black Hebrew Israelite, or if you're studying this doctrine, King James was a Black man. And when the first colonies was being set up in Jamestown in 1607, that these people who came over were basically following, a Black king in England. Right? Doesn't make sense. You have to think about the royal family coming down that line from this Black king and everything that took place before then. I mean, the knowledge would be out there that this guy was Black. It will be spread across the colonies and it will be known. Yeah, we know they get rid of information, but it still wouldn't make sense, or it wouldn't be fit to see white slavers following the orders of a Black king. So there's something you have to think about. Also, you have to think about the circulation of the King James Version once it did release, right? And then once we get the printing press and books are being released and things are being printed, what printing house was owned by a Black person that produced the first Bibles? We know the Gutenberg Bible was the first thing printed, and the Gutenberg Bible was going out. And we know that there were other things printed after this, but there's no history that show a Black man printing a Bible to get it out to the masters, the slave masters in America, for Black people to understand and learn. Why would white people accept a doctrine that is given to them by a Black king that they're also teaching to black slaves, right? So today, and you know how white folks stick together and they follow old time traditions, you would think that they would not follow this book. Also, you have to understand as a black Hebrew Israelite that you are not the only one who can read the Bible. That you're walking around believing that no white people in power, none of the so-called slave masters, none of the people running the 13 colonies, nobody throughout history up until now actually read the book to understand it the way you understand it as a black Hebrew. Nobody else read Deuteronomy 28 and said, you know what, this doesn't sound like no Jews, it sounds like black folks. It sounds like black people. They are the only ones that we can see with the yoke of iron. They're the only ones we can see with this type of condition and these things happening to them. It doesn't fit the biblical Jews in the book or the people who they call Jews today. And, you know, the Revelation says that these people are not Jews, but are of the synagogue of Satan, right? And that's just more for you to understand that we're still in a dualistic book, giving you a dualistic understanding about the people that they're talking about and giving you who they stole from and who they actually are. Now, instead of you looking at it and saying, this is trying to teach us something about who we are, rather than believing that you are the people in the book, if you did that, then it'll make a lot more sense to you guys. But people are believing that we are the actual Jews in the book, that our ancestors are the actual Jews. There has never been any proof in history that show and prove that anybody, any biblical Jew from any of the 12 tribes of Israel actually existed. So anybody from the Bible, biblically, Old Testament Jews, these people, Abraham, Isaac, Moses, all these people, there's no proof that they ever existed. So there's no such thing as a Hebrew or a Jew because we can't prove that anybody in the book existed, that they were actually real, right? Again, you guys have to understand the difference between historical evidence, right, and truth, right? Historical evidence or evidence is not truth. It's something you can look up. And this is what's happening with a lot of people. And I'm putting this out again because, you know, this is one of the biggest questions I get from a lot of people. And I get into a lot of debates and a lot of people argue about this situation. But there's a lot of simple truths that you guys can really understand that'll make everything more clear to you guys. The biggest one is understanding that, you know, King James couldn't possibly have been black, right? It makes more sense that he was a white guy. And it doesn't make any sense at all for him to be black and basically be in the position that he's in. Because one, what would be the reason for him during that time to put out this doctrine, knowing that we would never, ever see, you know, any truth from it? Why would you want this generation, those generations of slaves, to understand the Bible, knowing that they would never see the light of day or any promise of praying to Jesus at all, right? He knew, he would have known what was going to be fouled, though, what they were going to do. And one of the biggest things he would know is that they wasn't going to let them go no time soon. These people were never going to be free in their lifetime. So what would be the point and reason of him teaching them the book? A book saying you are cursed and you are here because you're cursed. What is that going to do? Unless you want that indoctrination to happen and for that word to be spread and passed down to the people, right? And then epigenome is going to kick in and people are going to be born with this feeling and understanding that they are cursed people and they're supposed to be slaves to these white folks. That makes more sense for a person to put out there if they want generations of people to believe this. If you want people to believe that they are special and blessed and God's chosen people, there's no way a people who believe that is going to walk around accepting slavery, because these black Hebrews are not. They're cocky as hell. You guys see them on the corner arguing and screaming at white folks. There's no way. They're super militant, right? There's no way that if you taught this doctrine in that way back then, that you would want, you know, black people to know about this. So you had to teach it in a different way. But how is it that if King James wanted black people to know that they were Jews or the truth about the Bible, why would these people be teaching the Bible in a different way? So I showed you guys the next game, the Bible and Christianity finally explained it. I've been to the Library of Congress in Washington. I've read the slave narratives myself. And I showed you guys in a couple of videos, I believe in that video as well. And it starts out with, Oprah, and I forget who the other woman was, reading the slave narratives, and the slaves basically saying that, you know, if they serve their master, they're going to live a life of good. Everything's going to be okay. And they go to heaven. You're going to be all right. But, you know, it's not saying you're going to be free when you get to heaven. So if this is the understanding they wanted to give the slaves, that you're supposed to serve your master on earth, and then when you go to heaven, you're going to be free, then how would King James allow them to teach this doctrine, as well as the other kings or what have you that came after them that would have followed or picked up the mantle of King James and so on and so forth. There isn't a history out there that shows that there was this struggle, right? Because this is what you would have to look for, that there had to be some type of, stabbing in the back. King James would have had to be murdered, and so many stuff had to happen, and his legacy and his doctrine, anything that he wanted to happen would have to be wiped out. There's no evidence of that. There's nothing like that at all. What we do see is that he was a Mason, that Sir Francis Bacon was the editor of the Bible, who was considered one of the fathers of Freemasonry, right? So when you look at all this and you see, one, the biggest mix up in this whole thing is just not just the dating and the misinterpretation of what the Bible was saying. The biggest mix up is that the guy is no way he's black. And you have to believe that he's black in order for the doctrine to make sense. Because if you don't believe that King James is black, then you got your doctrine from a white man. And this is what they don't want you to accept it. Then it's like, well, how can we accept it? How can we believe it if King James was white, right? Because they know the further you go back, everybody who we see, and I broke down, as you can see here, there were 16 Bibles before the King James given to us all by white folks. So wait a minute, all these white folks, then all of a sudden, one black guy gets it right. The one black guy, he gets it right. And this is the one we're going to accept and put out to everybody, including white folks, right? This is the one we're going to take in. And everybody from here on out is going to be following this black man's King James version, right? This is what the black Hebrew Israelites want you to believe, because they know when you go back, and as I said, the inception, the beginning of how we get our doctrines today comes from Ptolemy II Philadelphus with the Septuagint Greek. That's a white man, right? Then I showed you guys once again, I'm going to keep showing you guys this. I took this picture myself in the Cairo Museum in Egypt. This is Serapis Christos, right? So we already have documented proof of them giving us a God to worship in their image, a white man to worship in their image who just so happens to look like Jesus. So this is from that line. So when we see Ptolemy II Philadelphus in the Septuagint, white Greek, Serapis Christos given to us by white Greeks, and then you follow the history of Serapis into Rome, as I showed you guys, it's all throughout Rome, Roman statues and what have you, and then we get Jesus who looks like Serapis. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? That we're supposed to believe that all these Bibles before the King James Version were absolutely wrong. That God fucked up all these times, all these years and centuries of fucking up. And then he finally got it right and gave the correct word to King James, a black man. But Deuteronomy 28:68 is not the same in the oldest manuscripts, right? So this is the one I hear the most. Well, you got to read Deuteronomy 28. You got to read Deuteronomy 28:68. It's not the same in the oldest manuscripts. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means it's King James Version. So when you go to the oldest manuscripts, as I've shown you guys, Deuteronomy 28:68 is not talking about, slaves going back to Egypt on ships. It's talking about children. And I have the whole video on YouTube somewhere where I show you guys this and I prove this. So it's not talking about going back to Egypt on ships. It's not talking about the same thing that the King James Version is talking about. The older manuscripts is talking about something completely different. And as I said, remember, King James Version written between 1604 and 1611 when slavery was already in full swing. So, of course, they already knew about the yoke of iron and what was happening to the slaves, right? They already knew. They were living in that time. You believe that the King James Version is somehow the same as the oldest biblical manuscripts. And it's not, because we have them. We have Codex Sinaiticus, and we can prove and show clear as day it's not the same. There are differences, major differences. One, biggest one is, of course, the King James Version left out the deuterocanonical books, right? And left out everything about Constantine, about Alexander the Great. All that stuff is not in there, right? So the Maccabean Wars and everything, that's the skirmishes and little wars in between that is not talked about in that book. So it's stuff they left out that they consider to be Romanists, right? So this is the whole, mix up with that. And King James, a spirit, contrary to your guys' belief, a spirit was not put on King James for him to somehow get this divine notion to create the King James Version. He was commissioned by the Protestants, the Puritans, to do this work. And he agreed and he did so, right? Scribes helped him out. This is not some holy work from God that just gave this guy, after all these years, the correct translation, right? So this is something he did. It's his version. And then when you couple that with the fact that we had it for all these years, that Masons, drew it up, and that it's the head of the biblical book or the religious book that's on the altar in every Masonic lodge around the world, right? It is the leading religion for a reason. And we're coming out of that time of Christianity we're in this Islamic time to where, as you can see, Islam is dominating as far as worldwide, the wars and the change and more people converting because of what's taking place. We're seeing it a lot more Middle Eastern. We're seeing it more in Asia. So, of course, I talked about Thailand, them converting to Islam, and a lot of Asian countries, Cambodia. A lot of these Asian countries are, going more towards Islam and forsaking their old traditions and their history or what have you, which is outrageous. One of the things that shocked me the most when I was in Thailand, that I seen so many Thai Muslims, when their history, their religion is so deep and amazing. Buddhism is so amazing, and their history is so deep and real and proven. And we could go to their ruins and artifacts and touch the stuff and see the stuff, right? Whereas with that doctrine, you cannot. You can't go and find anything from no Israelites, from no Ishmael or anybody, nothing from Muhammad, anything, right? So it's something you got to think about. So we look at this, and I want people to understand, because this is something that I still see out there, and whenever I see it a lot, I try to stamp it out, which is why these videos pop up from time to time of me talking about the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, and I try to do it in different ways, but I have a lot of information out on it. But again, Deuteronomy 28:68 is not something that is Black history. It is something that is put there to deceive and to get you to believe what this doctrine is pushing, which is that it's our history, and it's not. So is the Bible Black history? In a sense, yeah. But in truth, no. It's just a story. It's hints. It's giving you allegorical stories that can pertain to us, if you put it that way, if you understand, right? So again, I broke down how you have the tribes in the Old Testament that were conquered by the Israelites. These tribes are tribes that go back to Ham, which is the progenitor of the African people. So they're basically telling you in the Bible that they were basically told by God to go and conquer the lands of Black people. And we know this happened. So it's so ironic and crazy that here you have Black Hebrews that want you to basically ignore Africa, look at Africa as your enemies, right? Because supposedly their ancestors, their biblical ancestors, went and conquered these African people, and they're supposed to be against them, those Africans, because one, well, you enslaved us in Egypt. Absolutely no proof of that at all. And as I showed you guys, even in Egypt, even in the Haaretz, their newspaper in Israel, they say there's absolutely no proof of the Exodus. There's no proof that they were ever enslaved in Israel. So what are we talking about here? But these people want you to believe it. And the proof that they give you, here's the thing, and it's another thing, because when you talk to these people, the only proof they give you is from the Bible itself. And that book is the book in question. So why would we accept that as truth in this whole argument when the book itself is in question? The history has never been proven, so it's not something we can stand on as being fact to bring forth during cross-examination in this argument. It does not hold up to scrutiny. It doesn't hold up to cross-examination. It cannot be proven true, right? There's never been any proof of it. It's something you have to accept by faith, which is why, as I've shown you guys, when you look up, archaeology tells you straight up, we could never prove the Bible true. So all these people who want to talk about empirical data and archaeology and evidence, right? None of it has ever been proven true. Evidence is evidence, right? There can be evidence. I always say this. There can be evidence that you cheated on your girl, evidence that you cheated on your dude, but evidence has to be proven to be true. You could be thinking she cheating, but she's talking to her cousin the whole time. They can say, you know what, we can prove that you committed this crime, right? Okay, well, let's take it to court. And they present this evidence, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and then we look at it all, and guess what? It's not the guy. You got it wrong, and it's not proven, so the person goes free. Evidence is just what is going to compile into truth. Evidence on its own does not equal to truth. So you guys are seeing things like historically accurate, and historically accurate does not mean proven true. Historically accurate means that it's accurate to the history, to the time, right? So historically accurate can be that when the Bible is talking about the food that the people are eating, the clothes the people are wearing, and the rituals that's going on around that time, it's historically accurate to what has been proven true for that time. It doesn't mean the whole entire story is true. It just means it's historically accurate what they're talking about, right? This is what films try to do when they have period pieces, period films. They make sure the film is historically accurate to the time. So they have, props, sets all done up to mimic that time frame so they can be historically accurate when they're filming, right? It doesn't make the whole movie true. It's a movie. Just like the book. It's a book. It's a story. So you get into these conversations with a lot of Hebrews, it goes from, I'm going to pray for you, brother. Or you just lost, brother. You need to accept the word into your heart. And then when you kick some knowledge, it's fuck you, nigga.